So big hello to all the viewers. Welcome again to the DLife in channel. I am Shashikant Iyengar, the host today. I am a DLife in life member and a volunteer. And for those watching this program, this is not a medical or nutrition advice. It's just sharing of an information. People are requested to take guidance of the doctor and a low carb nutritionist for any change. Also, there are no financials attached to this session. All are free of cost to disseminate genuine information. DLifeIn is a platform, a community platform for low carbers. It's a platform for those who are suffering from diabetes, obesity, PCOS, and other metabolic disorders. DLifeIn has around 250 success stories, and they also have more than 1,200 dishes, which are all tailor-made to Indian low carb dishes. DLifeIn was developed by Anup Singh, who is an engineer from IIT, a premier institute in India. Recently, Anup Singh and DLife has been recognized and awarded as icons of India by the Outlook magazine for pioneering low carb in India. And DLife has also launched a diploma in low carb nutrition last year. For those who are wishing to gain themselves with additional knowledge and help others in a scientific and systematic manner. So today, viewers, we have two special guests, and it's my sort of my dream to host these two guests. And I welcome Doug Reynolds and Pam Devine from US.
Thank you so much for having us.
So they are from a famous organization called LowcarbUSA, which all of us know. And let me just very briefly, talk about LowcarbUSA. Most of us already know. It's founded somewhere in 2015. It's an organization which is focused on dietary education and support by hosting scientific conferences, providing online coaching, and a comprehensive library of scientific papers supporting the way of eating, and a worldwide database of low carb friendly healthcare providers and nutritionists. So we have with us Doug Reynolds, the founder and CEO of Low Carb USA, and he is also the president of SMHP. And we also have the co-founder Pam Devine with us. So welcome to both our international guests today.
Thank you so much for having us.
So both of you can just call me in short as Shashi. And welcome Anup. So Anup is also a guest today, and I'm very happy again to host my guru as a guest. So let me just start by asking Doug to first of all introduce himself, and then Pam, please introduce yourself. Yeah, Doug.
Hey, so I'm Doug Reynolds. What do you want me to do? To talk about like?
Doug.
Up to where?
What is your background, and how come you came into this low carb field? So we are just very curious to know who you are from your background.
Okay. So, but I can answer all the three questions and like go right through to how we got into the low carb thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I was born in Rhodesia back in the day, which then became Zimbabwe. Moved down to South Africa. I finished high school in South Africa and went to university there. And I became an electrical engineer, basically, eventually then becoming a software engineer. And I did a bunch of work there in that field until by 1998, when I actually moved to the United States. And so carried on working there as an engineer for many years. And I was a consultant working on all sorts of international projects for establishing set-top boxes in different countries and different communities. In fact, Pam was saying before we got on the air here that I actually was stationed in Bangalore for about 18 months to do the very first Airtel Bharti set-top box that they released. I started to put on a bit of weight in my later 40s, and with all this traveling and everything, I carried on. I was a long distance runner. I was still doing a lot of mileage, but still putting on this weight. And I really struggled to understand what was going wrong. My knees were always sore. And I got, we got an email talking about low carb, or actually talking about ketones, saying that ketones were an alternative source of fuel to glucose. And I didn't even know what a ketone was. I'd never even heard of it. And so I started doing a bunch of research, and in about 3 weeks became convinced that it was explaining all the issues that I was having. It even explained all the issues I was having back in my 30s when I was running these ultra marathons and still struggling when I was loading up on carbohydrates for a few days before the race and then ending up on the day feeling terrible. And so I decided, Pam can tell you that part of the story, but I decided to change and dragged her shopping, and she can tell you all about that. And we started doing it, and I had amazing results. Over 5 months, all the extra weight that I had came off. My knees, pain in my knees went away. I was loving running again. And we decided that it was like, how could it be that I didn't know anything about this at the age of 51 at that back? And in that, like, this was beginning of 2016. And we decided we wanted to try and put on a conference to teach people who didn't know about it, like I didn't know about it, what this was all about and how profound it is in the ability to change your life. And so we did that. In 6 months, we put on a conference in San Diego. That was astounding. And since then we've done a bunch. We've done 15, 16 conferences now. We did one in Jakarta in Indonesia. We've done 4 or 5 in San Diego, the same amount probably in Florida. We've done a couple of others. One of the guys, actually one of the attendees on this call, invited us to come and help, and he helped us put on one in Seattle back in 2019. And it's just gone from strength to strength. And in the process, we've grown to add all these other features in, and we will talk about it later. Yeah. How that's evolved into this nonprofit society for metabolic health practitioners, and the clinical guidelines that we've developed. All that stuff that we've done is infinitely more valuable, I feel, to the community than just the original idea of putting on the conferences. So that's kind of, I think, a good point to stop here. We'll talk more about the other stuff later.
Yeah, and no wonder, I knew that you were a runner, and I knew part of your story, but I never knew that you were an engineer. So, as with, we have one more engineer sitting with us, Anup Singh, and engineers like you are actually making it big in the field of nutrition, and in understanding the disease pattern from a root cause point of view. So no wonder this engineer has made it very big, Anup. So so very nice and interesting to know. And Pam, please tell us about your background.
Yes, and again, thank you for having us. It's an honor to be here. And I actually grew up in San Diego, and I'm so happy to be back here again because I lived all over the country before, in my early 20s and in my 30s. But and I have some experience in the medical field. I was a certified and trained radiologic technologist in diagnostic imaging. So I was in the diagnostic side, and I did that for about 20 years, and I saw my patient population changing a bit. I did see, especially the last few years I worked in a hospital setting in the early 2000s, that we were seeing more fatty liver, that we were seeing more visceral fat around the organs. We were seeing our patient population get heavier and sicker. Now, unfortunately, in diagnostics, I didn't get to see the patients to follow. And I often just had a patient who had come to visit the emergency room because they weren't feeling well. And then I worked in outpatient setting a lot, and I saw a lot of people with chronic pain and diabetes, comorbidities, where they were needing to see the orthopedic surgeons that I worked with. After that, when I was working with Doug, he brought me in, and I also worked in his as a consultant in the technology business that he was working in when we were first started working together. And we've now worked together for more than 10 years in a couple of different things, technology, until we found, as he was saying, low carb. For a few years before that, we'd been recommending and volunteering for a running club and talking about sports nutrition. Nutrition and wellness was always a passion for us. We were talking about carb loading drinks and the sugary drinks, and saying you need it for, you know, energy to run, and you need it to build muscle, and all the things that we were taught incorrectly along the way, like so many of the other people that we learned. When he received that email talking about ketones, alternative source for fuel than glucose, it was like, wait a minute, let's think about this for a little bit. But he did find at that time the resources that did have some of the science behind why. And it was Jeff Volek and Steve Phinney, their book and articles. But it wasn't until about 3 or 4 months later, when we were telling his mother, who still lived in South Africa at the time, that we were doing this. She says, that sounds like the Tim Noakes diet. And Doug said, wait a minute, because he hadn't seen any of the stuff from him online. And he immediately started looking on the internet at that time, and he found his article that says Going Against the Grains. And he saw him presenting at Low Carb Down Under in Australia with Rod Taylor's organization and the conferences they do. And he found a video of him tearing out the pages of his book. And this book, for Doug, being a ultra distance marathon runner, was like his Bible of running. And Tim Noakes was his mentor. And he always says he would have never run 100 marathons if it hadn't been for reading this book that Tim Noakes wrote. And he found the one where Tim Noakes is tearing out the pages of the book saying, I'm sorry, I was wrong. We were talking about carb loading for so many years, saying you need carbohydrates for energy and fuel, and you actually don't. It's really important to have protein and fats in your diet, and you really don't need the carbohydrates because your body can actually make those for you. And he talked about what he learned after he started looking at it, because he had gotten diabetes himself, and he had seen his father suffer from diabetes and lost his life to diabetes. And now he's made it his mission to educate others. Now, when we found it, we made some real simple changes that we had learned about. Actually, not so simple, because they were actually questionable. We didn't really understand it. Doug said to me, he touched on it. We're going to the grocery store and let's do this. And he made a list. And okay, I said, wait, you made a list and you're going to the grocery store with me? And because he didn't normally do that kind of stuff. But, you know, and we had to look and see different kinds of meats, and the salty fatty meats and dairy that had more fat in it and no grains. And I was confused. I said, where am I going to get my nutrients from that I'm normally getting from those kind of grains? And he said, well, you're going to get them from vegetables, and you're going to get them from meats, and you're going to get them from dairy. And here's some things that you can look at. And I was like, okay, maybe I haven't been getting those nutrients from these sources. That's why I had to have a fortified grain, and I don't need those in my life, but I had to slowly take some of them out. I had to learn. I don't eat bananas. I was eating a pretty healthy diet myself, oatmeal for breakfast and with a banana, and sometimes one of those granola bars with nuts and seeds and protein. And the yogurts that always have too much sweetener in them, but I was trying to get the ones that did not, but everything was low fat. And so there was a lot for me to learn. And when we saw Tim Noakes's things, we came across a movie called The Serial Killers. Cereal spelled cereal, like the food, breakfast cereal that you would eat. And I hadn't started reading articles, but in the movie, it was easy for me to see and hear what they were talking about. Jeff Volek and Steve Phinney, again, were in that movie. And in the following one, Tim Noakes was in the movie, and they talked about how to start a low carb ketogenic diet. How did it feel? Donald O'Neill talked about how did it feel, and he was an athlete. And so he was saying, you know, how do I feel when I'm working out? what do I eat? This is what I cook. What do I do when I go to the market? And the following one was Sami Inkinen rowing to Hawaii without carbohydrates. So another elite athlete who had gotten diabetes himself could do a 30-day long row to Hawaii with no carbohydrates. So really showing people that you don't need carbohydrates, and also going back and talking about the science and talking about the epidemics of diabetes across the world. I know it's growing so badly in India as it is in the US and all the countries in the world. Too many people, 1 in 3 now, are on their way to either already having diabetes or pre-diabetes, and they're forecasting it to be 1 in 2. We didn't suddenly change genetically overnight to all of a sudden everybody in the world having diabetes. So let's look at what is causing this. Are we eating the wrong things? Has really become a big focus. And in the movie, of the serial killers movie, Tim Noakes said, we're changing the way the world eats one meal at a time. And I got chills. And I said, how can I help? How can we help be a part of bringing that message to more people? And that really led us to, we have some conference experience. Maybe we could put on conferences. Doug had tried to become a coach through that organization that was associated with Tim Noakes at the time in the movie, or maybe with Tim Noakes and some other things. And we learned some things that we didn't know. And we thought, well, maybe we should teach people. And we originally thought we would do coaching and do a course for individuals to learn how to start a low carb diet and what does that mean, what do you eat and what don't you eat. And then we quickly realized maybe we could reach more people doing conferences. And at the very first conference, we really realized it would make a bigger impact if we reached more medical professionals throughout the world. So that's really led us down our big mission of doing and reaching more healthcare professionals who will touch and reach more patients for chronic illness, and also who will support somebody who's come in and wants to do this because they've seen it in online, in a magazine, on wherever, it's talked about a lot, but not a lot of healthcare professionals understand it. So we want to raise awareness so that it can support people who want to do it and know the benefits and know how to do it and know that it's not dangerous and that it's very beneficial.
And I think it is within a short span of time, all of you have been able to rope in a lot of doctors, and many of your conferences, of course, I've seen, though I may not have attended live, but I've seen all the recordings. And it's really surprising that you've been able to gather all the doctors from across the world to come on a single platform. And that has really, I think, it is leading a big change, rather than we lay person telling something. I think when the medical fraternity comes in, it makes a lot of difference. And probably they are going to make a lot of difference to their own patients, which we really see. I think, Pam, you also have your own personal story that you also lost a lot of weight following low carb.
Yes, I was in the same boat with Doug. We were eating very similar things. We were working a very stressful job. It was one of the first times that in my professional life, when I turned 40, I wasn't able to, I started having a lot of pain in my feet, and I was having trouble doing the jobs in the doctor's offices and the hospital. So I transitioned into doing technology with Doug. And it was the first time I'd sat in a desk job. And I started putting on weight in around 40. And, a little bit at a time. We always tried to stay active. We were volunteering running club. I got a bicycle when I couldn't walk far, run far. I tried to ride the bicycle and go down to our gym. We evolved into doing yoga quite regularly for a couple of years. And then we met somebody through some of the health and wellness events that we used to do for corporate events that we had done for a short time, that did a martial arts, functional martial arts training. So we were doing that 3 days a week. And Doug will tell the story that he used to wake up in the morning and just be so wiped out. And then once we transitioned to low carb, the recovery was so much faster and he felt better. I, being a woman, when we started implementing a low carb diet. It didn't come off as easily. So I always try to highlight differences between men and women. Women don't always lose weight as fast as men do. He says, you know, within 3 months, he lost those 35 pounds. Kilos is what, 15, Doug, or so?
Approximately 50%, we can
Mhm.
say.
And so I was at my heaviest when we started. It wasn't really heavy, but it was heavier than I'd been, and I was really uncomfortable about it. I was getting very confused about what to eat. I had switched to whole grains. I wasn't doing the white, like the recommendation was try to cut out anything white rice, bread, pasta, and starchy potatoes. So I would go to the whole grains, breads, and switching to brown rice. And I was bringing in some other things like quinoa and more fruits. But I didn't realize at the time how much those more additional fruits, eating more fruits, were bringing much more sugar into my diet. And I was craving sweets a lot. Both Doug and I were, I think because we were in such a stressful job at the time, one of the things that led to Doug, he really was bringing sweets. We were buying them, too many, sitting in front of the television, eating sweets, thinking that was helping a stress level, which that makes it worse. And I was eating that healthy breakfast in the morning, but when I went to work 2 hours later, I was starving. And I don't know, in India, do you have the word hangry? Do you
Yeah,
ever?
I think we low carbers know the word hungry.
When we didn't eat low carb, we got hangry 2 hours after having a meal, especially, you know, my morning breakfast had very little protein and fat in it. And I didn't realize that I needed that until 2 hours later. We had driven into the office, stressful commute. We were driving 45 minutes a day, and I was already working for maybe an hour. Just got there and I wanted to eat again. I needed to eat again. And all I could think of was getting some eggs at the deli, and what time did they open, and could I get a sandwich with some meat in it? Or so I would say, I'm going to run over to the deli and I'll be back in just a few minutes, and then I'll do the rest of the work before lunch. You know, I still had one meal that I was going to have, and then lunch. And I was just never having the energy, and never, always going up and down, up and down. So for me, the biggest thing when I went low carb was not going up and down so much. It was really important for me because my clothes were getting tighter and I was uncomfortable, and we were more active than many of the people that we knew in our lives that we worked with. They didn't run after work. They didn't drive all the way back home for 45 minutes to go to martial arts training, but I was still putting on the weight. And I was very, like I was saying, very confused about what I should be eating. I was trying to lose weight, but I was trying to eat salad and more fruits and vegetables, and it was still coming on. So I was becoming very insulin resistant, and I didn't even know the term at the time, insulin resistance. So learning that, and then finding a way to keep my blood sugar level more stable with protein and fats, and not spiking my insulin and my blood sugar and then having it crash back down and have to eat again, was very liberating for me. When we first started and people were talking about intermittent fasting, I thought I could never go all day without eating. But it was probably 5 or 6 months into it where I was kind of trying. I was skipping breakfast and I was having just fat in my coffee, you know, cream in my coffee, or sometimes I was mixing some butter, coconut oil, almond milk, just trying different things. And then I would go for a walk and come home. And one day I said, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Doug, and I haven't eaten anything. And he says, that's really good. And how do you feel? And I said, I feel really good. And I don't really feel, I feel like I could eat, but I'm not hungry. I'm not hangry, and I'm not anxious, and I'm not feeling like I have to eat something. And a few weeks later, within another week, I probably went until 5 o'clock, until dinner, without ever eating anything. And it was so freeing for me. I really love that part.
So that's nice. I think each one of us have our own personal stories which have really brought us into this low carb world. Now, like I am a diabetic. I'm in the 6th year pill free, and Anup Singh is here on 10 year. He has crossed 10 years pill free journey. So he's also
That's
diabetic.
great.
So so that led his to the foundation of D-Life. Now, coming back, Doug and Pam, what exactly, sparked you to this, starting this Low Carb USA? I mean, how it really came about, how this idea came about, and what are all the different activities you do, and what are all the facilities which are available, especially in the website. So I do see a lot of, conferences happening or other resources. So can you just tell the Indian viewers, how this idea came, and what are all the activities you do, and what are all the features available in your website?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mentioned that over that 5 months, I had like everything reversed, and then all sorts of things that I wasn't expecting, like, better, clearer cognitive function, and a lot of my symptoms of the traumatic brain injury that I had back in my early 20s, that all improved, and it was just life-changing. Even though I wasn't really sick, like some people have monumental life-changing experiences, right? But it was monumental for me. It was huge, and I was enjoying my life again. And we'd become aware of other, like Low Carb Down Under had done a couple. The Noakes Foundation in South Africa had done one conference in Cape Town. There was a lot of stuff from the diet doctor in Sweden, and we started to learn about how they were changing their dietary guidelines to acknowledge that reduction of carbohydrates was an authentic, a valid option to offer to diabetic patients and stuff. And it was on my birthday in January, and we were out at a sports bar with the people that we worked with, and we'd come to learn by that stage that don't talk about keto, because it's like Fight Club, First rule about keto is don't talk about keto, because the people that aren't into it are sick of hearing about it. So we didn't talk about it, but once everybody had gone and it was just myself and Pam sitting there still, we obviously started talking about it, and I started pounding my fist, and saying, like, we need to help people. We need to get 1,000 people in the room. And like Pam said, we had experience putting on conferences. We knew how to put on a big conference, but we just didn't know anything about the low carb community. I'd never been to a low carb conference. I didn't know anybody in the space at all. So the next morning I got up, Pam was still sleeping, and I wrote like 4 emails. I wrote to Jimmy Moore, Jeff Volek, Steve Finney, and Gary Taubes. And I thought, okay, if I can get 4 like prominent names in the space, well-known people, that would be the core, and it would be a beginning of something to build on for the conference. Jimmy Moore replied in about 10 minutes and said, like, how else can I help? And he introduced me to a bunch of other speakers that were potential, and pretty much all of the ones that he introduced me to agreed to come and do it. Gary Taubes was very hesitant, because he told me later, he's actually went to an event where they paid him a lot of money to be there, but there was like 2 people there, and like it was embarrassing, and so he asked eventually to talk to me on the phone, and I was very aware of what he charged for an hour of his time, and we ended up sitting on the phone for an hour, but by the end of it, he said, okay, if you do this, if you put this on, I'll come and speak. And that was like the turning point. I put the phone down, I had it on speaker, and Pam was sitting just down in the hall listening. And I kind of looked at her and I said, shit, this is like real now. And so, yeah, we established a domain, registered a domain, built a website, established a social media presence with like 3 followers. And yeah, in 6 months, at the end of July, we put that event on. And people had to talk me off the ledge because I was so upset that we didn't get 1,000 people in the room. But we got about 350, and compared to anything else that was going on at the time, that was like probably 3 times bigger than any other conference that had been on at the time. And so, you know, people had to convince me or make me aware of the fact that what we'd done was actually pretty stunning in 6 months, you know. And when I look back, I see how hard it all is, I realize that that was actually quite a monumental achievement. And like I said, it went on from there. People said, you need to come to the East Coast. And so we eventually organized one on the East Coast in January. And that's been the sort of mid-year in San Diego, January in Florida, and both coasts. And then that's kind of been the standard ones. And then we've had other ones around the country that we've done, like we mentioned, Seattle, as well as those ones. But I think it was really after during the second one, when we were in West Palm Beach. First of all, we'd done it before. So I wasn't running around like a chicken without a head. I'd done it before, so I was less stressed. It was also much smaller, a smaller event, less people. And it was so we were all set up in the foyer of the, like right outside the lobby, basically outside the ballroom where the conference was going to be, not like completely spread out like it was in San Diego. And so when we were sitting at our registration table, I could see what was going on and the setup going on in there, in the ballroom, and then I could make sure everything was going wrong, or going right, it wasn't going wrong. And so I was able to look up and smell the roses almost, and see what else was going on and be aware of what was going on, and not like with this tunnel vision of trying to get the event organized. And it was really a young lady that came in. I was working on my computer, but I was at the registration table, and she came in to speak to Pam and the others that were actually doing the registration. And she just started crying, you know, and saying like, I'm just so glad that I'm here, and that you can't believe how difficult it's been for me. And she's a nutritionist or something herself, and she was trying to coach people, but didn't feel like she should because she hadn't lost all the weight herself. Her family was giving her a hard time. Her doctor was telling her she's going to kill herself. Like, she was literally fighting everybody to try and heal herself. And then through the weekend, you know, we saw more and more of her, and how she just like blossomed, you know, and she was on fire by the end of that weekend. And it made me realize that more than just putting on a conference, it was really important for us to start building a community, to give people exactly this situation, like a safe harbor, a place for them to come where they can talk to somebody about what they're doing, and they're not going to get chastised for it, or ridiculed for it, or attacked for it. And so we started focusing much more on in between the conferences, like cultivating this community. What else could we do? And so we decided that providing a list of doctors that were open to this conversation would be a really good thing to do. So it took me a long time, it took me a couple of years to get it done eventually, but eventually I did. And so now there's a list of providers where somebody could go in and type in their zip code or the city if they were in another country in the world, and find hopefully a doctor or a therapist or somebody in their area that they could go and talk to that would be able to help them. We also established also it took me years, but eventually managed to get a really decent library of scientific papers and articles and stuff that did research into this whole concept. And so now people had a single place that they could come if they wanted to go down the rabbit hole, if they wanted to get in the weeds with all the science and the technical stuff. Then there was a sort of a place where they could go and find all the relevant documentation and papers and stuff that they were looking for. And then Gary Taubes actually suggested that 2018 that we have a session where we got feedback from doctors who were trying to do this in their practice, what their problems were and their successes and stuff. And it really was, he suggested it because it was the focus of his next book that he was actually busy writing, and he wanted to use it as research, basically. And he got a lot of people that, as a result of that session, that he met and interviewed afterwards and actually formed part of that book. But in the process, he introduced me to Adele Height, who was a registered dietitian. And he'd been talking to her a lot about this, and he suggested that we get her to moderate the event or this session. And so we got talking, and she had this huge vision of stuff way beyond what Gary was suggesting we did in this session. And she was talking about establishing standard of care. And if I'd known we were going to talk about this, I would have brought it up so that I can read it, because I can never remember to recite it. But she was in a lawsuit, a malpractice lawsuit. And the judge explained to the jury what standard of care meant before they retired to go and deliberate on this thing. And basically, it's the legal definition of standard of care is that it's a consensus, effectively, of practitioners in a similar environment with similar training, what they actually do in practice. And it specifically says it's not what they learn at university. It's not what they get, from professional organizations. It's not even a set of clinical guidelines, because that's just a document. But it is a consensus around that this is the right thing to do in any particular situation. That is standard of care. It's an intangible thing, actually. And her big dream was to establish an alternative standard of care around carbohydrate. She calls it therapeutic carbohydrate reduction. TCR is becoming like an acronym now. And she said, like, we need to write a set of clinical guidelines that give guidance to clinicians who want to do this, and then develop conversations around that document so that it can eventually establish standard of care. And we're not arguing with anybody. We're not challenging them. We're not saying we're right and you're wrong. We've got the answer now, and everything you've been doing is not effective, or it's rubbish. We're not saying that. We're just saying, if you're open to therapeutic or the concept of reduction of carbohydrates, then come and listen to this conversation. Come and read this document and see if it's maybe something that maybe one of your patients is struggling with, that you can offer them an alternative. Yeah. If you're open to that conversation, then come and learn from us. And so this community is growing now, right? And it was actually at the event in Seattle that Mike Wood helped us put on there. That's where we actually launched and published officially this clinical guidelines on the LowcarbUSA website. And we started to develop professional organizations with forums and stuff for doctors and dietitians and all of those practitioners to become a part of, to try and cultivate the conversations that would establish standard of care. And it didn't really work. LowcarbUSA just wasn't the right place for that. And so, as I said, that now leads on to the next chapter in the story, which you were saying you were going to ask about later. So maybe we can develop. But I mean, and even now, even though some of that's migrated to the SMHP now, if you can still find it on LowcarbUSA, but some of it just points to the SMHP. So its real home is at the SMHP now. We can talk about that a bit later.
Yeah. So I
I'm
think,
talking a lot now.
yeah. See, it is really wonderful that, while all the professional organizations have their own clinical guidelines, their own standard of care, this is something which was lacking in the low carb world, and this is something which you guys have actually succeeded in coming. And yeah, we can come to that second part also, the SMHP. So please do tell us, why couldn't the guidelines be there in Low Carb USA? Why the formation of, what is the specific thing about Society for Metabolic Health Practitioner? Why? What could this not be there in the Low Carb USA itself? So what is the need
Yeah.
that you found a need for a separate independent society?
Well, yeah, it was like, first of all, we didn't have a huge reach, so a lot of people didn't even know about it. But it's, I don't know, it's just the Low Carb USA, it was like an organization teaching low carb. But Dr. Trokalajian, who's part of the MD podcast duo,
Yeah.
he started writing on Twitter saying, we need to have a professional organization that brings everybody together. And I said, wait, we've already got that, And he said, yeah, well, we were talking, and I was saying to him, I've got that, but I've got like 25 members, it's like people are just not, they just didn't see it as a professional organization. It's not a professional organization. It's just not. So what we need to do is establish a proper non-profit that exists as a professional organization. So that's really what I think, so I put a board of directors together, including Dr. Eric Westman, and he actually had a lot to do with us coming up with the name that we eventually called it, the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. And so the whole thing is we're focusing on metabolic health. And if you look in our bylaws, one of the things that we do talk about is the ketogenic diet and therapeutic carbohydrate reduction. We do talk about that, but it's not the only thing we focus on. We focus on metabolic health and what is required to improve metabolic health or establish good metabolic health without drugs. And so, like I said, the low carb diet or whatever becomes a big part of that conversation, but it's not the be all and end all of it. And so now then now it's an organization where, and the hope is it's like an umbrella. So the paleo people and the primal people and the keto people and the people who don't agree with low carb, but they do agree that sleep and stress and those other things, that we eliminate those stresses out of our life and those factors out of our life, that we will be, metabolically healthy. So those people can be included there. And so it's, and what it does is unite all these splinter groups all around the world and give them a home where we agree on the fundamentals. And it gives us a voice against the haters and the vegans and the pharmaceutical industry and the other people that are trying to squash this conversation because it's just not in their interest. And as individuals, another Dr. Robert Sivers, who's also on our board of directors, his explanation of it was like, you take a a grain of sand and you throw it in a pond. You barely even notice that it landed in the pond, right? But you take a bunch of those grains of sand together and you build a brick. You throw it in the pond, you notice that something landed in the pond, right? And so that's his analogy of why it's important that we have this unifying organization where everybody comes together when we want to challenge the US dietary guidelines or any other world dietary guidelines that we want. Where we want to challenge anything, we want to stand up against people that are advocating that the only way to deal with diabetes is with insulin and other metformin and these other diabetic drugs. When we want to show, we need a united front to stand up against those people and show them that that's not the case. So that was why this organization was so important. And I mean, we eventually launched it it was a huge project. But when we eventually launched it in the middle of December, We've had, I think we had 20 members or something on LowcarbUSA. We've got 300 and something actual signed up paying members now on the SMHP. We've got about 2,000 people in our mailing list that are now following it. We've got almost 2,000 practitioners who have actually put their names in. And it's, when we built this new website, it's like 1,000,000 times better than what we had on LowcarbUSA. So on LowcarbUSA, you could search on zip code, and you could search on city if it was another country out of the US. Now you can search on specialty, on doctor's name, on zip code, state, city, country. There's just a ton of different ways to search this database to hopefully find someone who can help you. And it's, and so the clinical guidelines have now migrated there. That is their real home. And the practitioner database, which is also migrated there. And the papers, the database of papers initially moved over there as well. But we're just at that point where the Nutrition Network, who is a spin-off of the Noakes Foundation, they have come up with an amazing database of papers. But this is like much more complete than we had. And it is so well done and so easy to navigate through, and categorized, and so we most likely are going to end up just pointing to that, as opposed to duplicating the work and trying to keep ours up to date when they're doing a better job at it. So I would rather just point people to their work and free up some time for us to do other stuff that's more relevant for the SMHP. So yeah, I mean, that's the journey, and we're super proud of getting that done, because I think that's going to do a lot of, it's going to be so useful and do a lot of good for so many people.
It's really wonderful, and this is probably the first professional organization for low carbers, and even I have gone through your website, and yeah, there are a list of providers, and I do see a lot of people from India also listed, and we have Anjali here who is also listed there, and we also have Dr. Tanmoy here who is also listed there, I know. So I seen them both there, and really nice to find any of those many of those doctors around from around the world. They can be there, and
and I think just let me just chip in there, just because I think this whole COVID situation has opened things up so much more, and people, the virtual appointment has become a reality, and so it's like in the States, there's a lot of things where people they're relaxing the laws about states and stuff like that. So, somebody in a different state can still speak to a doctor in California or whatever. So I don't want to get long here, but even if the person's not in your city or state or whatever, contact them and see if there's a way. You can't find anybody in your own hometown. Find somebody else who speaks the same language as you, but is somewhere else, and contact them and see if you can at least get a virtual consultation with them and get the help from them that way.
I think that's really wonderful, and I really call upon all the low carb nutritionists here, those who are watching this program, those who will see the recording later, that they should go ahead and get themselves listed in SMHP, and it's really a wonderful site, and probably one of the unique site. And I've gone through the guidelines. It is as good as any of the other guidelines we found in professional one, maybe ADA or ESD, or any of the other maybe AHA or some, and you have given it very nicely. I mean, how do we start, and what are the cares to be taken? How do we titrate the drugs? I mean, that's really wonderful. And especially I liked the part about, how you're given this, how do we titrate off the anti-diabetic drugs, which is the first drug to be knocked off, like, knock off SGLT2 inhibitor first, because that doesn't go along very well with our low carb ketogenic diet. And then which can be there knocked off in the last, maybe DPP4 or metformin, which can stay for quite a long time. And how to take care of, people, those who are there on insulin, how to really titrate. It's really wonderful. And I think, for viewers, those who are wishing to practice low carb, and especially offering the service to diabetic patient in conjunction with the doctor, of course, they should actually have a look at these guidelines. It's really wonderful. Something which they can print and keep it in their office also for ready reference. It's really beautiful. So it's really wonderful.
It's been translated into 9 different
Yeah,
languages
yeah,
now.
yeah.
So not anything for India, but a lot of countries, and we're having one done for the Czech Republic at the moment right now. So that's going to hopefully be added in a month or two.
Probably with the help of Jan, I think Jan Vidak. So you probably are doing. I
Yeah,
don't
that's
know.
right.
Yeah,
Jan
yeah.
Vidak is doing it. Yeah.
He's the most active person there, which I know. And it's really wonderful. Of course, English is one of the most widely spoken language in India, and absolutely, you have it in English, so absolutely no problem for us.
Yeah, that's good.
Good, because I was going to ask. I was going to ask if there was a language in India that might need to have some help translating, but if you think English is good enough.
English is good enough, at the most the second language could be Hindi, but nevertheless those who practice low carb, they all know English, so absolutely it's perfectly fine. I don't think we'll require anything beyond this.
Okay, yeah, that's good, because it's a lot of effort, and it's a lot of effort to maintain it as well, so don't do it if it's not necessary, for sure.
And I think within a short span of time, you guys have really made a mark by launching LowcarbUSA, or now the SMHP. And I think it's really going to go a long way in fighting against this menace of metabolic syndrome, which is there. And I'll also now shortly ask Anup. Anup, can you just tell everyone, especially Doug and Pam, about your work in D-Life? In short, how we can explain about everything.
Okay, let me begin by, good morning, Pam, and good morning, Doug. And we are very thankful that you have joined us. Now, as far as my journey is concerned, like Doug, I'm an engineer, and I majored in extractive metallurgy. So, material energy balance has always been the favorite subject. Now, in 2011, I was detected diabetic, and as usual with every new case, I never knew what diabetes was actually. The only knowledge I had was that a diabetic has to inject insulin. Now that was a bit of a scary part, but from May 2011 till May 2011, I was up with all the information needed, and I was very desperate not to go on any insulin or any drugs of any type. Now the issue was the doctors. I know, as they always say, that you start walking. That is first step. And drugs, yes, you have to go because diabetes is a progressive disease. Slowly you have to finally land up with insulin. Now, yes, I started walking. It was around 12 kilometers per day, 3 hours per day. I was just spending on, walking around. But the advantage was that in May 2011, my A1C landed at 5.0. But I knew I could not walk, 10, 12 kilometers for entire life. So the only solution was to look for some other solution which would work. And I landed up on many Western forums. But the issue there is, Western diet is primarily, if you look at the animal protein consumption, it's around 120 kg per capita, whereas Indian diet average is around 4 to 5 kg. So that was a bit of a challenge. Though I'm a non-vegetarian, I don't mind eating, anything, except for certain things which are not allowed as per our religion and all that. So by November 2011, I was very enthusiastic, like anyone who succeeds on these things, low carb and everything. I used to talk to doctors, and they used to scoff at me that this is all rubbish and stop wasting your time on Google. That was the usual answer I used to get. I used to talk to doctor, and despite him being my friend, then I used to talk to pathologists also. So same answer they used to give me, that stop wasting your time on Google. But I was determined. I was determined not to, go back to eating what had landed up into a situation that I had landed up. So roughly around 2013, there was a forum launched which was addressing specifically Indian diaspora. That forum was a part of a forum of a UK-based site. I mean, you must be knowing Health Unlocked. So I started talking there, but I guess, there was some issue with respect to them being acceptable to low carb. So I think within 4 months, I lost my account. I kept resurfacing with different names. But finally, when it got too much, because they wouldn't allow me to talk freely, and I was hounded by even moderators and everybody there.
Hmm.
So I had booked the domain in 2012, but I was not sure how to start and where to start. But 2014, I thought, let's start with forum because that's the easiest thing to begin with. And let's see how it goes. Fortunately, from the other side, there were around 160 Indians by then who had already migrated to low carb. So the night we launched, 160 just jumped ship within 3 days. So that's how the journey of dlife.in started. And 3.5 years, we are just operating forum. But ultimately, we found that forums do come up, they go very active, and in the long run, they die out. Because community is such, people come and go. There's no, they're not sticky users. So then we decided we have to, be different from the run-of-the-mill forums that operate around the world. So that is when we started adding features. First was we launched the front end of the site. Then, being an engineer, you want something different. So data driven. So we integrated a data log, hoping that people would use it, punch in their numbers, at least for blood sugar, lipids, whatever testing they do, so that in long term we have some data to, really look into or present it as evidence of what we do is working. However, that did not, not many used it, but still we kept going. And in 2018 onwards, we started adding, we added the nutritional database. Then we added integrated recipe posting module, integrated with the nutrition database. Then we added food log. Food log was integrated to data log. I mean, we kept doing everything so that, people, if they want to use, they can use it. But unfortunately, not many have used those features because as it is with most of the diabetics, they're more eager to get their numbers in control. That is first thing. And once they have it in control, nobody has got so much of free time, to really start sharing their actual numbers on day-to-day basis. So 2018 to 2020, 2019 end, we finished all this custom work, and then 2019, I think, this low carb and very low carb started appearing in position statements or papers of associations who were approving it. Now, that was the time when we thought, let's add something on the education front also. So 2020 April, we launched the low carb diploma, where certification is not from us. It is from a autonomous college, NAAC accredited. Basically, NAAC is a body under University Grants Commission in India. So that certificate has got legal validity across India. And wherever Indian diplomas are recognized around the world, it would be valid. So that was a very short journey, from 2011 to 2021. 10 years, yes, no drugs. My A1C is normal, except for, I think in March last year, I was struck with COVID. So that time, there was no testing allowed because it was very early days. And there was a lot of rationing on testing. But I really wanted to know that whether I had been through it or not, because it was 13 days of hell. So the day I recovered, I went in for, all the tests. And the most horrifying number that I got was HSCRP was 10 times normal. Now
Oh.
that convinced me that I had been through the storm, and my lipids had crashed like hell. TC was down to 100. But in December 2020, everything was back to normal again. So yes, 14th Feb 2021, no drugs, no pills. A1C December was 5.4. And yes, it is low carb, high fat. And the only thing that I would like to highlight is that in India, normally in Western world, low carb and keto is used interchangeably, normally. And that is what people in India who normally, try to rehash that diet, they also think that LCHF means keto. In fact, if you talk to any general practitioner here, and if I tell them, that I'm on 100 grams carb, he would say, oh, that is keto. That is keto. It is very dangerous. So yes, it is dangerous, but yes, I'm surviving for 10 years on that diet without any pill. And I had challenged initially, to all the docs that my body is available for you, do any test, but you pay for the bills. Pay for the bills and show me the number, which is a red flag that I would. I am on a suicide mission mode based on those numbers. Nobody took that challenge, and that challenge is they did not. Only thing they say is, you will die. You'll have CVD. You'll have multiple organ failure. So that's the usual reply that you get from any, I would say, any doctor who is not aware of what actually LCHF is. They've just skimmed on the surface. For them, LCHF means keto. But for us, LCHF and keto are two separate domains, and that was the foundation on which we, started talking. And finally, as of now, 250 plus success stories, not a small number. If we go by the opposition that we face day in and day out. And that's it. A very short story of 10, 11 years.
Wow.
Yeah, Shashi.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Anup. Thank you for explaining it in very short manner. Doug and Pam, thank you very much. You had accepted this invitation, and you could tell us what are all the good works you have been doing, and especially about SMHP again. Can I open it for some question and answer session? I mean, if the participants wants to
Yeah,
ask
I
something.
forgot
Yeah.
one thing.
Yeah.
Shashi.
Yeah.
So all this hard work of 10 years, roughly 6 years, because we launched in 2014. Finally, we got some recognition from a major media house in India. So, I was called for an interview where I was told I was forced to be talking in Hindi, which is the local language here. So I said, fine, because they wanted a wider coverage. So they said, you will have to talk in Hindi, English. Okay, you can bring in few sentences here and there. And I was told that recording would be around 60 minutes, and then they will edit it down to 30, 40 minutes. Now, after editing, I got a call that there was nothing that could be removed. So we let everything stay, and it is a 56 or 57 minutes of recording, no editing, nothing removed. So that was one, and that was for the digital platform of Outlook India. That's a big name magazine. Readership circulation is around 425,000. So their English and Hindi magazine would be giving around 2-page coverage, and the issues will be hitting stands on, I think, 12th of April.
That's exciting.
At
Congratulations.
last, we got some recognition.
That's awesome.
Recognition.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
I think this is wonderful, Anup, and this is actually the second recognition. I think the first one came somewhere in one more magazine, if you recall. I think
2016. That was Open Mag. Open Mag.
That was.
That was not a solo coverage. That was part of an article. Here it is solo.
Yeah, fine. So this is it. And regarding about me, Pam and Doug, I'm a diabetic for last more than 5 years, and Anup is my guru. And when I was searching for a solution, as soon as I got diagnosed, I joined D Life, and from there, the journey started. I started gathering a lot of knowledge, and I'm a voracious reader. Actually, I keep reading a lot of scientific material. I have more than 4,000 hours worth of reading, and I read a lot of blogs. I've seen all your videos. I read a lot of those books, and so this is how the journey is still going on. And every day I'm learning something new. And of course, I'm active in Twitter, and I'm connected to all the big thought leaders, and I read all the scientific studies which are released immediately. So this is something which something which I gained. So I'm now opening for a question and answer session. I have unmuted everyone, and if they want, they can put on their videos and they can ask our guest whatever they want to ask. Yeah, Dr. Tanmoy, if you're here, you want to ask anything?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful meeting you. And I've been listening to your amazing story. And India is a very complex country. It's not as simple as people eating the same kind of food throughout the country. We have, in our country, the type of food that we eat changes every 50 kilometers, every 25 miles. So it's a very complex thing. But, we have, our country has always been a very carbohydrate eating country throughout, like for centuries. So what went wrong in the last 20, 30 years? I think it is several things. Number one, we doctors as medical professionals, we follow the American guidelines. That is very, very true. As AHA, ADA, or whatever. So in the 80s, I think the big thing that happened was the low fat craze, and the low fat guidelines also came to India. And there was a lot of our traditional cooking mediums changed. And then we also started eating the Western way. The people started working more, and we were eating not only the junk food or the processed food. And so it was a combination of all these things that led to the epidemic of diabetes, obesity, heart disease that we see today. Today in India is perhaps, along with China, is the diabetes capital of the world. And the rest of the story. I don't want to repeat it, but tackling the problem in India is not going to be easy. We are up against a huge backlog, and it has to be, if you ask me to put it very briefly, it has to be done in two ways. One is like Anup, people like you, Shashik, people like you make your doctors, whomever doctors whomever people you knew, aware through your site, and they have to pressurize their doctors along with the available evidence. Like today, evidence is abundant evidence is there. And secondly, the doctors themselves have to be convinced, because you go to an average doctor's office, the slightest pretext, they will start you on statins, they will start you on a half a dozen pills before you leave their office. So that has to be changed. The patients themselves have to become aware. So these two, I think this is a two-pronged approach, and everything in medical science takes a long time. Even if we follow the guidelines, in 2015, the American Heart Association said that cholesterol is no longer a nutrient of concern, but it still hasn't translated into practice yet. So that is how slow we are. So that is how the uphill task is, but we have to keep on trying. So we are all doing our bit, and your story just inspires us. That's all I would say. Thank you.
And Dr. Tanmoy, to add to what you said, unfortunately in this country, doctors themselves are victims. They themselves suffer from diabetes. They also take insulin. They also collapse on their table after having an heart attack.
Yes.
I know a professor of cardiology of Mumbai who was younger than me, collapsing on his coffee table, having a severe heart attack, and just dead on the spot. I mean, they suffer from end-stage renal disease. I mean, they are also unfortunately the victims. It is so unfortunate to see. And that is a small endeavor we are doing. And on my part also, I keep educating as many doctors as possible. And it's good to know that, we have doctors like you who are actually, very open-minded, and probably
Yeah.
all
The
your
good news
podcasts.
is in my hospital itself, amongst my colleagues, I managed to not only reverse obesity in a dozen of them, reverse diabetes in more than half a dozen doctors. So that way, in my hospital, a lot of people have been influenced. So if everyone does our own bit, like Dr. Cyrus has said, a small grain of sand can become a big brick.
It's really having to go from the bottom up instead of the top down, because the organizations
Yeah.
aren't teaching it yet. They're
No,
still
no,
not
no.
wanting to admit that they're wrong. So a patient can bring the clinical guidelines to their doctor and say, please read this. I want you to support me.
Yeah.
There's
That has
work
to be done.
it has to be done. And the work that we're doing in the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, putting volunteer committees together, working groups to talk about how do we bring awareness campaigns? Where do we bring them? Do we? Some people are working in schools. Some people are working with the military. Some people are working in medical schools. Some people are working with families and parents and churches, because we've seen one medical professional reach one person who brings it to one other person who brings it to a larger community, and one more, and it kind of goes in a tumbleweed to reach more people. And as we bring education and awareness, like you're teaching the doctors, those doctors are teaching their other doctors, then they're going to teach their patients when they feel confident.
Right.
But if they don't have the information, they're not going to feel confident. And if they're hearing the wrong information, then they're going to continue giving the wrong information. Sadly, like you were saying, Shashi, many of the medical professionals, the practitioners who have come to this have been sick themselves. We want to reach them before they get sick themselves. They've learned this in medical school. It is a big mission and a lot of work to be done, but we just have to keep going, like you said. And Jali, you were saying in the chat, that's a mindset shift as well. You have in India and many areas of the world, and you said in specific regions and within families, you have tradition, you have culture, you have, this is how you show love with food. If you can change the mindset, we've got training on our website. One is a mentoring program that goes, and you can use it on your phone, that has a coach with you that talks to you about supporting those kind of behavioral changes and mindset. In the Nutrition Network's advisor certification course that is on both the LowcarbUSA.org site and on the metabolicpractitioners.org site, the advisor training goes into teaching somebody to be a coach and how to find out where a person is in their mindset and maybe change in a more positive way. That nutrients are going to support my body for fuel. They're going to support my body to better quality of life instead of leading it to disease. And maybe we can change recipes like I knew you have on your site. How to adjust foods just a little bit. So you don't use rice, you use something else. I don't know how available cauliflower and cauliflower rice is in your communities, but if you can swap, maybe you still use the same spices. Beautiful. I do Indian spices in my fish. I do Indian spices in my cauliflower rice many times. I put it in some other organ meats if I'm going to eat that day. Whatever it is that you're eating and you want it to taste a similar certain way, just adjust it a little bit. Is just a little change. Hi, Anjali, I see you.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you because like Dr. Tanmoy was saying, India is so complex. While he says every 50 kilometers you will have change in cuisine, I would say every family's got a different style of cooking, different approach to their own food. It's gone to such an extent that we've got a mishmash of north and south and all of that inside one own family. So basically, what I do when I connect with my clients is not just give them a swap, because a lot of communities out here, typically Facebook communities, because that's the social media is pretty aware. There's a huge population. So with keto going and they look more for swaps, like for instance, you have a bread or a naan and they instantly look for a roti. But then what I feel that if you still continue to look for a rice or a roti as a main part of your meal, it's not going to be sustainable for long because you're still not getting into the mindset of eating healthy. You're only looking for ingredient swap, which may not actually work. So I agree. It's completely from the mind where you're educating them, coaching them to look at nutrition from a very different perspective from what we have been seeing all these years. So I will definitely take a look at the sources that you've mentioned, so I can pick up a few tips out there. Pam, I had a question for you, and yeah, for Doug as well. You know, do you over there as well experience dietitians and nutritionists who are also metabolically unhealthy, who are pretty much on the heavy side, maybe suffering from diabetes and still giving out the same old high carb advice,
Absolutely.
How do they justify
Unfortunately.
their advice then?
Oh, I know.
Because they're not
There's-
convinced that it's their advice that's making them sick. They think that's just like
Genetic.
yeah, it's genetically disposed to it or whatever. They won't believe that they're because they've been taught this their doctrine, and then they preach it like the gospel, and they can't believe that what they learned and what they teach is making them sick.
And it's interesting because we talk to somebody almost every single day that, like you said, Doug, they can't believe that it's what they're teaching is making them sick. We just spoke to a doctor 2 weeks ago. He was teaching medical students how to treat diabetes, but then he got it himself and he couldn't believe it. He said, "What am I doing wrong?" Well, he was only teaching medication on top of eating the same way, being active, eat less, move more, eat more grains, eat less fat. And we
eat less meat.
Eat less meat. Eat less meat. And I don't know if anyone here has seen the movie Fat Fiction. There's a dietitian, registered dietitian. She's in northern US. She's a part of our Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners and Low Carb USA now. And we've been in a working group with her. She still runs into some challenges at her hospital, but in her movie, she talks about, and she says the same thing that so many people that we've met have said. I was frustrated. I was telling all my patients and clients what to do, and it wasn't helping. She didn't believe they were doing what she was asking them to do, or she didn't understand why they weren't doing it. And I was reading something yesterday, another physician, she said same thing, frustrated. My patients say they can't make these changes. They're not sustainable. They're not able. But I think it's because, like you were saying, they're not teaching nutrition from how can it support my body, and changing a mindset of you don't have to have love and it doesn't have to be the same thing that we've been doing for the last 10, 20, 30 years, but also that you don't need the carbohydrates, and that if you can show, like Alyssa Gallagher in the movie Fat Fiction, she started doing low carb. And what they show in the movie is she was having people test their blood sugars. Now they have the continuous glucose monitor, but someone else was talking recently about having people test normally, blood stick 6 times a day. So you can see if you eat cereal that your blood sugar goes up and down. You can see if you eat something like toast and then naan and rice and something with your dinner and lunch, how your blood sugar goes up and down. If you can show them when you cut those things out and eat protein with vegetables and how the blood sugar stays level, but also ask them, how do you feel? Because that's a really powerful thing that happened in that movie, particularly where they did something for a certain amount of time and then they did something for another certain amount of time. And they were able to talk about writing and also tell people in the movie that they felt differently. They had more energy. doing a low carb with just focusing on protein and fat, vegetables and different meats or eggs or whatever fits into their lifestyle that they can eat, but not eating the sugars and the processed foods and the grains and the breads and the rice and the cereal, because then they didn't have energy and their joints may have hurt. They had headaches. They didn't have clear thinking. Those things are really important to people when they don't have pain and they can think better. So maybe if we can share those kind of things where they're just having simple things that happened in their life, not even necessarily really bad illness, because little things like that make a big difference to people when they want to play with their kids and they want to get their work done and they want to have energy after work to go and do a sport or something like that.
True. If we have time, I'd just like to ask one more question to Doug. Do we have time, Shashi?
Yeah, one more question.
Yeah. So, Doug, what was your, considering that your background is from engineering, what was your experience when you would connect to, nutrition fraternity and people from that scientific field and talk to them about it? I mean, I do understand Pam is from that field. She has that experience working with people. But how about you? How did you go around? Did people take you seriously in the first go? How long did it take for them to really recognize your expertise?
I think they still don't take me seriously. That's why I have conferences. That's why I get other people to speak on the stage.
Yes.
I just organize it. I don't know. I think now, at least the people that are in the industry kind of know me and how genuine I am about trying to get this message out and that, and so they will listen. But a new doctor I'm sorry to say this, but quite in general, they kind of an arrogant bunch, and they look down. They look down on other mere mortals as below them, and that's genuine. That's a genuine problem for. And what's happening now with this whole thing, because it's so new and it's not standard or whatever, a lot of the people that are at the forefront of this investigation are engineers. We're talking about Ivor Cummins and Dave Feltman and Dave Dykman, who's very, very involved in the type 1 diabetes community. And he's a rocket scientist. He's a genuine rocket scientist. That's what he does. And he actually spoke at our very first event. And unfortunately, he's a little bit abrasive as well. And he's had so much issue with doctors telling him that he doesn't know what he's talking about, that he's very anti-doctors, basically. And so he got up on the stage and he was, without acknowledging that, hey, you doctors that are sitting here have obviously come to learn something about this, he just categorically said, oh, doctors don't know what they're talking about. And that was kind of unfortunate as well. But you hear doctors coming out of there. What does he know? He's just an engineer. And you hear that all the time, even with Dave Feltman. And what does he know? He's just a scientist. He's just an engineer. But even if you look at the developments of some of the medications that the doctors swear by now, those were invented by scientists and laboratory rats that they weren't doctors. They may have been a PhD doctor, but they weren't medical doctors. But they were trying to find a solution to this disease or whatever, and they developed cultures and whatever, and they eventually came up with this medication that can help fight that particular disease. And now the doctors swear by that, but they don't recognize the fact that it was a scientist or a lab guy that worked that out for them in the first place. And it is what it is. And so like I said, I just find other people that they do respect and that they do acknowledge, and get them to tell the story. And I just take the roadblocks out of the way. And for the most part, I take the roadblocks out of the way and I facilitate them getting on the stage, and then let the doctors listen to them. And because now then they believe it, you know, or they're more inclined to believe it than if I got up on the stage and tried to say the same thing.
I think that's a very important point, Doug. You said, there's some having a mutual respect, so that all of us learn properly,
Yeah.
and that becomes the very core foundation of learning. There's one question, from one of the participants is, in Twitter of late we find there is some dispute on this carb insulin model. People are telling that it is faulty or it doesn't work. So what is your opinion on this? I mean, you have any view on this? Because there seems to be a little fight on this, that the carb insulin model is flawed.
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the fact is that there's no science to justify it or that explains it. It's not based on scientific evidence. It's just based. It started out as opinion, and it's just become accepted as reality, and there's no science to prove it or to show it. And as opposed to everything that we talk about is got a lot of and more every day science that's actually coming to the fore that's showing that what we're talking about at least warrants a deeper dive and a further look and consideration. And I think I mentioned earlier, that's one of the things that we don't try to do. We don't try to show that we're right and they're wrong. I try to stay away from that argument, and just say, look, this is what happens when you reduce carbs and you add healthy fats back into your life. And here's all the papers that show, trials that have been done. Here's getting into the millions now of anecdotal evidence of people that have adopted this lifestyle, and look how their lives have changed. You cannot put your head in the sand and refuse to see that. I personally feel that it's malpractice for a doctor to refuse to recognize that this is at least something that they should learn about and possibly offer it as an option to their patients. If they don't do that, then they are guilty of malpractice. That's my personal opinion, but I'm sticking with it.
I think we are all learning. We are still learning, so that newer and newer concepts comes, so that we'll keep improving ourselves. So
yeah, that's why it's so amazing to have the doctors here, because they are open-minded and they are listening. I often tease most of them and say, you should have been engineers, because they have inquisitive minds. They're saying, why isn't this working? I've been doing this, some of the doctors, I've been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years. And all my patients have just got sicker. And at least the chronic illness patients have just got sicker. And a lot of them are really depressed, because that's not why they went into medicine. They went into medicine to help people, and they haven't been able to help them. And in the process, most of them have got really sick and fat themselves as well. So yeah, but the inquisitive ones, the ones that look at it and say, hey, this is not working. Why not? There's got to be something wrong. And they take the time and they make the effort to go and try and learn more about it and try and understand why it is that it's not working. Those doctors are the ones that are in our community now, that have seen the light, because they've made the effort to find out about it. If you've got a couple of minutes, I tell that story about Dr. David Unwin. You're probably aware of, a very famous guy in the UK.
We had a podcast with him last year.
Yeah, right. So now his story, how he became aware of this whole thing, was a patient who wasn't taking her meds. He called her into the office because she hadn't been filling her prescriptions. And when there was a lady sitting in the office, and he said, "You must be early because I'm waiting for someone else." And she said, "No, doctor, it's me." He didn't recognize her. She had changed so much. But when I did a podcast with him, and because I always told that story secondhand. But what he told me, what I didn't know about it, was that she actually went on then to yell at him. She was extremely angry with him for not teaching her how to fix her diabetes and obesity problem. And she had gone out and learned it for herself. Like, she joined these Facebook groups and that, and she did it herself, and she took herself off her meds. You know, I mean, we don't advise that anybody takes themselves off their meds, but that's what she did, because, and she saw these massive changes, and she had to come off her meds or she was going to be dangerous. And so she just stopped taking them. That's why she wasn't filling her prescriptions anymore. And I made the excuse for him. I said to him, "Well, yeah, but you know, your doctors don't get taught this in college." And the most profound thing I've ever heard was when he said to me, "Doug, that is no excuse." He said, "I am the doctor. I was the doctor. I should have known better. I should have tried to understand why it wasn't working for her. I should have learned about this so that I could teach her about this." And that's what I've committed the rest of my life to do. And that I've got so much respect for a doctor that looks at it like that.
Wonderful. It's really wonderful story. And I think when I really know and read about a lot of low carb doctors, a lot of them have actually learned from their patient. I think even Dr. Ted Naiman also has a story where, you know, one of his patients lost a lot of weight, and then from where his learning has also started. Similarly, there are a lot of other doctors who actually learn from their patient. So it's really the other way. So thank you very much. And for both of you, Pam and Doug, you know, maybe in future, you know, we may be doing this virtual Low Carb India conference, and probably we are going to need your assistance and help. And we want to propagate this, you know, more and more in India, that this is an option which is available for those who want to choose. It's an option. Otherwise, there are a lot of wonderful drugs and everything is available, but there are a lot of people who like to know and choose it as an option. So probably, you know, we're going to make it aware. Probably a lot of medical professional will also be, you know, informed more and more, you know, probably when we have this conference. So
yes, I sure hope so. And we'd be glad to help you. We always are inviting now the medical professional, the clinician, the doctor, the practitioner who's seeing in his clinic to talk about his results, so that other doctors and practitioners can see, oh, the A1C is lowering, the triglycerides are lowering, the inflammation's lowering, and the weight's coming as a result of that. It's not all about weight. It's what's happening on the inside when you can test it and have lab work, and the doctor can see how this is changing like this. If we can continue to educate and show clinicians and doctors and practitioners, and we can do that through in India with you guys and help that, and then do it more in this other area, whatever we can do to help.
And I think now that the virtual world has opened, you know, everything can be done virtually sitting at our home. So that's what you're looking for. And I wish to know, I don't have my words to express my, you know, sincere thanks to both of you, that you could spend around, you know, around more than 1.5 hours with us, with India, to, you know, to tell us about your experience and educate us about, you know, all the good work you're doing. So Anup, you'd like to have some word, again, final word. Anup.
Thank you, Doug, and thank you, Pam, for sparing
It's been a pleasure,
roughly around 100 minutes now. It's a big time, and we hope to meet again. And as Shashi said, you know, holding conferences is uncharted territory for us.
Yeah, so, no, we will help you with pleasure. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, so we would need all the help, because that is something which we are not having any experience or any knowledge of. So sure, we'll be looking for help and hope we can do it jointly also. That's not an issue.
So thank you, Doug, and thank you, Pam.
Thank you once again.
And viewers, thank you very much for watching. And I thank all the participants again who could spare their time and come and attend this live session. Thank you. So we are signing off.
And you know, you're doing a recording of this, right? So
yeah.
I just
we'll
encourage
be posting
people
it in
to
YouTube.
Share it with as many people as you can.
Yeah.
And People need to get this message, man.
So we are going to post it in YouTube channel. So
Wonderful.
yeah. Thank you once again. Thank you, folks.